Hey fam, welcome to yet another episode of Crystal Clear Convos. I'm so excited to have you joining me this evening. I'm Crystal Smith. I am your host, and here we have transparent conversations that inspire change. If you haven't done so already, please make sure you go in and you like, subscribe, comment, share, tag somebody, let them know Honey Crystal Clear Convos is on. And do we have a convo for you? Tonight we are doing part two of why men hate therapy. We have a licensed professional on with us. We have a pastor on with us. We have a man on with us that's going to give us all the scoop. Now, if you haven't seen part one, make sure you go back, watch part one so you can get caught up on part two. We've already covered all of their extensive bios and all the things that they have going on. But I want to welcome yet again Reverend Christopher Houston and Minister Jacqueline Houston. Welcome again. Thank you so much for joining us for part two.
Glad to be here, Crystal.
So, last week we talked about so many different things. We talked about some of the stigma wrapped around. We talked about your introduction, Chaplain Houston, to therapy, your introduction to therapy as a couple, and some of the things that you all had going on, how therapy has helped you all maintain 25 years and four children, and the importance of it. And you all were so gracious to be transparent and share with us some of the things that go on. I think a lot of times people look, oh, from the outside looking in, oh, because it's a pastor and a first lady, or oh, because they're this and they're that, they have everything together, when in fact there are things going on in our homes that need to be addressed. And sometimes therapy or counseling can help us find ways to work through and navigate through the challenges of life, past trauma, and things of that nature. So our last topic, when we were talking about, let's see, we talked about so many different things. I want to kind of talk about, we talked about how you had to go in and you have to be willing to be transparent and be willing to share and open up. You can't go in and say, oh, I'm just here because she wanted me to come or because he wanted me to come. But both of you all have to be willing to go in and expose what's really going on so that you can find ways to work through it. Let's talk about some of the questions that men may have. And Chaplain Houston, you'll be able to chime in as Mrs. Houston gives us some insight. Some of the questions that men may have, or some of their thought processes behind counseling. For example, how do I know I need a therapist? In our last episode, you talked about how it may not come out or appear, they may not even know or be able to identify it as depression or identify it as anxiety. But how would a man know that they need therapy other than their wife saying, you crazy, I'm tired of you this and you that, and all the drama behind that? How do I know I need therapy?
I I will say what I've found with most people. I mean, it's just not just with men. Most people, we call it a disorder, is because your life is in disorder.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Come on.
you can't get it back in order. It's not going back into the pattern or a place where you feel comfortable. So that's why it's called a disorder. So you may not know it's a disorder. You just know your life is still chaotic after you've had the fight and it should be over, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or
Mm-hmm.
you've lost your mom and you're still not better after 6 months.
Yeah.
Your life is still in a disorder. So when anyone who finds themselves in a place where they can't go back to normalcy after a trauma, after a tragedy, after a loss, after a major incident, you need to seek counseling. Um, Apart from, we were talking about some of the stigma with men. One of the thing is, they are expected to man up. And sometimes when you can't even find the energy to even do the things that you would normally do, such as make love to your wife or even have a casual conversation without crying or feeling really sad or
Right.
trying having to withdraw or something like that, you probably need to talk to a professional at that point, because most of us are resilient enough to go back to normal
Yeah.
if there isn't something wrong,
Right.
something more in depth wrong. So I would say if you're finding yourself in those places where you're not able to bounce back within 3 months,
Okay.
and normally you are, go and seek some help. And I know it's easy to say go seek some help, but I'm gonna do a little segue. Your insurance company, ask them who are some providers
Yeah.
that you can go and see. Ask some of your friends. You may not think that they have seen anyone, but they may be a good resource. Ask your primary care physician for a referral. They usually know one or two therapists that they would recommend. They're also in your system. If they're recommending them, they'd probably take your insurance.
Yeah.
So your EAP at your
Hmm.
with your HR will normally have a system of providers that will do it for free. You can go for free and sort of get your, try it and without a cost to you and see if it works for you. But if you're not bouncing back after a trauma or an incident or an issue within 3 months, and that's normally, hey, you're probably back on track within 3 months, go see someone professionally.
So let me just jump in real quick. First, it's a little feedback on my end. I don't know if you are able to adjust your mic on your end. I want to make sure that there's no echo. I don't know if your mic is even close. You may not have even touched it. Um,
So ours is coming from the computer. So
Okay, so it's probably my end. Just to that point, before you interject, Chaplain, what about trauma that people may have experienced in their childhood? They have carried this and internalized this for so long, and they don't even know that the trauma now has a residual effect in their relationships, their ability to work with people, their ability to date, and so many other areas of their life. They now have this residual of the past trauma that they need to address. So, yes, we have major life events. We may have trauma in our adulthood, but just briefly touch on it may not be something that just happened or something that happened last year or whatever. You can have trauma from a childhood that you've internalized and you feel like you've dealt with it or you feel like you've addressed it, but yet it's still affecting other areas and other people in your life.
What I call it, and most therapists would say, you've normalized it. So
Yes.
you've developed, systems of behaviors to help you cope. So you've developed this whole coping pattern
Yes.
around the dysfunction. And many times it's because you're still in the environment or within the
Mm,
same type of people. So you have to have that defense mechanism, those coping skills to still remain in that environment. When it becomes apparent to you, is usually you see the pattern for yourself after many or several relationships that start and end the same way,
hmm.
then maybe you should go and talk to someone. Or someone points it out to you. One of your friends says, "Didn't you just date a guy just like that?"
Right.
Or how is it that you always have friends that are using you? You know, when you start hearing about your pattern,
Okay.
you might, and you don't know how to fix it. Like you don't know, okay, I'm going to try, going in different friend groups or talking to other people. If you don't feel you have the skills to do it, go see
Hmm.
someone,
Yeah.
because it's usually stemming from a trauma that you have normalized in your system, and you have developed coping skills to help you deal with that.
Yes. That's really good. Thank you for that. Chaplain?
well, I just want to before your initial question, and the reason why I was so anxious to jump in was because why do men not want to go to therapy?
Hmm.
How about we have this culture right now that is so open to the sensitivity of the use of words.
Okay.
I think before we get to therapy, how about we just get to help?
Okay. I like
Okay?
that.
Because again, you're feeding back into the stigma that men have by just completely calling it therapy.
Mm.
We're jumping already to a clinical term that's going to scare men off from even starting the
That's
process.
so
How about
good.
I just need help? That's why coaching has become so
Mm.
popular,
Yeah.
because it's not therapy, it's coaching. It's something that's familiar that men can probably relate to quicker than they could therapy. I want to give a scripture real quick. It's Proverbs
Sure.
11:14. And when we
Mhm.
talk about the idea of help, watch this. Here's what it says, Proverbs 11:14. Where no counsel is,
Mm-hmm.
the people fall,
Mhm.
but in the multitude of
Counselor.
counselors, there is safety.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Okay. So I want to point us in that direction to know that getting help, having counsel, may be a stigma in our society, but it's not a stigma in the Word of God. It is
Okay.
something that was that God put there for our benefit, for our use, for our as a tool to help and
Resource.
as a resource. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So I just want to say that let's work on the idea of not so much jumping before we can get to therapy. How about we just get to health?
I love that.
How about
Mm-hmm.
if you want to balance your life, if you want to some assistance with
A
just
transition.
sorting through transitions,
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
okay, things of that nature. How about we just work on the verbiage and find something that is more accepting to men to buy into, so that they don't have to fight the stigma to get into the
Mm-hmm.
room.
I love that. So
And
we're not calling
and
it therapy. We're not putting clinical terms behind it. We're not trying to make it fancy. Just help, right?
Help,
mm-hmm.
That's awesome. Thank you for
assistance,
that.
coaching.
I love that. Thank you. Um, so the next question that may come up or may arise, what am I supposed to talk to with this therapist? In the last episode, we talked about, when you get there, not opening up, but what is it that you're supposed to talk about when I get there? How are you going to start me out? Do you have a question, a chart, question, and answer? What are we going to talk about?
Most therapists initially start with you doing an intake, which is background questions about your medical history. If you've been to therapy before, if you had a diagnosis, are you on medication? Any history of trauma. So, a lot of, if you answer those completely, and usually they do have you do several short assessments to
Mm-hmm.
see where your depression scale is, where your anxiety scale is, that gives them a lot of information. So, what I say, if you're going to go to a therapist, take your intake information seriously so they don't have to ask so many questions
And pry.
initially.
Mm-hmm.
That they will see, okay, they're quite open. They've told me their medical background, that they haven't gone to therapy. And there's usually a little comment section where you can say, I am scared to death. I don't know what to say. And they can prep themselves to be ready for you in that therapy session and do a lot more of the talking
That's
to
good.
ease you
Mm-hmm.
into the process. But it is about, this is our initial and our fundamental core, is that we build a rapport with you. So if you know that it is centered around the client, it is centered around you. So we're looking to develop a rapport. We're looking to, okay, how can I help you? Then the atmosphere is built for you to come in and really take over. You can take over that atmosphere if you want to cry, if you don't know what to say. I have many clients that come in and say, I don't know what to say, and then they're
Mm-hmm.
crying.
Mm-hmm.
You can cry for 30 minutes. It doesn't matter. It's part of the process.
Yeah.
And we're there to help you through the process until you're ready to use words or you're ready to tell your story. It takes some of my clients 3 months to really get down to the root. Because usually we're talking about their mom or their dad or whatever the
Mm-hmm.
incident is. And
Yeah.
then we finally get down to them. That's our job, to be patient enough to walk with you.
Mm-hmm.
Like the Holy Spirit walks with us as a paraclete, we're there to walk with you through your story so you can really unfold it and see it for yourself. And so we can help you in those places that may trip you up or have tripped you up in the past. And we can look at it and say, how can we help? How can we do this better?
Yeah, and that's a good point. And back to your point of saying like what are you willing to give and what are you willing to expose and be transparent about, because you can only fix it and work on it if you can address it. And that means that you have to be open and honest about it. Now, what would you say to people that say, because I've it's so many people that have said, "Oh, I tried therapy, it didn't work," or "I went to this therapist, they just didn't work, they weren't a good fit." Like Chaplain Houston said earlier, you may come across a counselor or therapist or help that's not a good fit
Yeah.
for you, right? So, how do you determine that, you know what, I'm not gaining any ground, I'm not seeing any results? How long should you stick around before you say, you know what, I may need to try somebody else? Just like with medication, sometimes you have to try different medications before you find the right one that's a good fit for you to be able to address your problems. What would you say to that?
Let me speak to that first, if you don't mind, babe. Here's one thing. Let me just be real straightforward with my brothers here. Okay, gentlemen, be honest with yourself. Be honest with your story. It's not just about getting in the room.
Right.
Sometimes you get in the room and you got enough skill, you
Mm.
can make that thing what you want it to be, and you ain't
Hmm.
taught nothing about what you really need.
Nothing.
Okay, you said everything. You spent. Oh, I can spend 30 minutes. Oh, I got this, but you're not getting your help. The other thing is help doesn't always look like what you think it looks like.
Okay.
Sometimes help is going to come from may come from somebody that you don't expect. It may be a black man sitting with a white woman and don't expect to receive anything from her, and she helps him through. If she can get past the veneer of all of his smoke screens and all the other things that he's trying to do, it may
Hmm.
not look like what you think it should look like.
Come on,
Sometimes the
sir.
help you need ain't familiar to what you're used to. The
Hmm.
reason why it's called help.
Mhm.
Hmm.
So be open to the process. Be open to what it looks like, what God wants to allow it to look like. So yeah, you may have to take a risk, and you may
That's
spend some
good.
time with somebody that may not really be helping you a little bit. And at some, if it's not helping you, you'll know it, but you're not going to know it probably in the first, you know, 30 minutes of a session when they're going through an
Yeah,
assessment
that's right.
mode. Okay, because why are you asking me all these questions? Because now you know from what Jackie said, it's a part of the process. And in order for me to help you, I need some information.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Okay, and if you're not giving the right information, you're not going to get the right help. And yes, you can derail the process anytime you want. It's in your control.
Mhm.
That's good.
Along with what Chris is saying, you also have the right to say, "Hey, can I have a 10-minute consultation
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
before I sign up?" And you talk to that clinician and ask your questions,
Yes.
Hmm.
because sometimes their background isn't a good fit for you.
Right.
Sometimes their specialty isn't a good fit for you. Sometimes even their availability is not a good
Mm-hmm.
fit for you. Those are the questions you can ask. You can say, "Hey, before I sign up, I need a 10-minute consultation just to get to know you, ask some questions." So that will eliminate some of the nerves and also get you used to asking the questions. The other part is, if you don't feel you're getting anything out of it, be honest with your therapist.
Mm-hmm.
This
Yeah,
is your time, you're paying for it.
absolutely.
So you need to say, "Hey, you don't say much in the therapy session. I respond better to question answer."
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Or, "You ask a lot about my history and I really want to talk about it." Your therapy is your time. Not every therapist has that mentality, but it's just like any other service. If you're not getting the service you need,
Mm-hmm.
inquire as to why.
Right. And it's
Okay.
not
And
just them venting, but that person being able to give them feedback or input at some point. Like they do want to allow them to talk, but how do they know to balance that? Like,
a skilled therapist will allow you the room, but
hmm,
also then come back around and challenge what you're saying. Because if you could have figured it out by talking,
that part,
you would have done it already,
Mm-hmm.
that
right?
part,
So sometimes it is good for you to get it out. And most therapists, if you stay with them long enough, they'll figure your pattern out. that you need to come in for 10, 15 minutes and just, say everything that's going on, tell them everything that's going on in your life, and then you're going to get down to the work. What we do have is a treatment plan. So in the
Yeah.
beginning, we agree these are our goals.
Mm-hmm.
A therapist stays on the goal, even though it may seem chaotic. We're professional enough, though we're going to get you back to what you said, even though it seems like, hey, you're
Right.
just letting me talk. But I'm gathering information.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yes.
for men, it may be hard for them to start with a whole lot of talking. So what you're going to need is a therapist who's willing to ask a lot of questions,
Okay.
and then you be willing to answer those questions honestly, even if it makes you uncomfortable.
Yeah,
One thing I want you to remember is counseling is confidential.
it is.
They're not going to say it to anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You can't guarantee that of your wife, your girlfriend, your mother, your sister, your auntie.
Nobody
You
else.
get to go
Best
into a
friend.
room and say what you want to say,
Yeah.
even if no one else in the world will ever know about it. It will stay right there.
Awesome.
That can bring you some comfort if you really think about it.
Absolutely. So, a couple other questions they may say or may ask, uh, how often should I see my therapist and how long is long enough?
Um, Depending on, I mean, it depends on the client and depends on the issue. Okay. Some people will go to therapy for a very short season because it's an issue with their mother, or there's a very defined goal.
Agreed.
Mm-hmm.
Because therapy is defined around your issue and how long it takes for you to feel comfortable that you've developed the skill.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's not for the therapist to tell you, oh no, you need 10 more sessions. We're not in charge
That's right.
of the service. What we can do is give you feedback. I don't think we fully developed the issue or the skill that could get you through this, but if you choose to leave, we'll be here for you. That's
Right.
a professional's standpoint. You can't force therapy on anyone,
Mm-hmm.
but the I was just looking over the stats for my company, and most people come for 5 to 7 sessions,
Okay.
and that usually is an issue that came up and they wanted a resolve or to feel more in control over that one issue.
And
Okay, people. Mhm.
mhm. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say some that have been in therapy before, they may go a little longer knowing, okay, I dealt with this issue, but it's attached to other ways I handle life.
Mm-hmm.
So they may stay a little longer. And then you have some people who use it as just a monitoring of their progress. So they may come
Yeah.
monthly
Mm-hmm.
for quite a while. So it's no set standard, but between, I would say, if it's a major trauma or issue, you may be in therapy for up to 6 months to really get the benefit.
And if
Yeah.
I can say,
Sure.
Crystal,
Mm-hmm.
just real quick, and if men have a good experience in counseling,
Mm-hmm.
they'll come back.
They'll
Yeah,
go
they
back if they feel like they're making progress or the person's a good fit. Definitely. And it's also important to note that you may go through a period or a season of therapy and then, or help, and then feel like I'm good right now. And then a year or
absolutely.
two later, something else may happen. 5 years later, 7 years later, and you
Yes.
start getting this feeling again and feel like your world is chaotic. And, maybe I need to go and revisit that so I can get some things sorted out. I know my therapist, she's a miracle worker. She's the bomb.com. And I have made so much progress because I was willing to come in and put the work and effort and be honest and transparent, not knowing what to expect because so many of us have, again, this stigma. We didn't grow up with going to the therapist, but it's been so effective and so helpful in my life, and the fruit of it, it's amazing. Anyway, this isn't my interview. um Next question for you: should I go alone or should I go with my spouse? if the spouse is even willing to go. There's a lot of times where you have like people that are have marital issues and the spouse won't go, so they won't go either. Can you speak to that and just kind of like the alone work that they can do?
Just quickly, because I know we're running out of time. Um, I would encourage, even if you're going as a couple, to go individually somewhere else. Have your own individual time,
That's good.
because the issues are within each of you. Like,
Yes.
there has to be compromise within each of you to get the unit to work well. Okay. So when you come in as a unit, if you're already doing your work, you can be more self-aware of, hey, I do that. So let me work on that and express that within the couple session. So if your partner's not willing to come, go on your own.
Hmm.
Do your individual work.
And if I
Awesome.
can say this, Brooke, I know we're at time,
Hmm.
but please, if you want men to have a good experience, it is often best for them to warm up to the counseling situation when they're not in true crisis.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, as opposed to being in a point, you're at the point of divorce and now you want to come to counseling. Not saying that you should not.
that's
I'm just
good.
saying that if you have to work through the stigmas of counseling first, just to get to the marital issues, just so that you can, it's a lot to take on at one time.
Yeah,
So work on it individually if you can when you're not in crisis, when you
yeah.
just want to experience the situation. And then when you're in crisis, it's a tool that you can use. It's something that you're ready to go with. You know how to do this. Let's go.
Because in most cases, it's not zero to divorce. There's things along the way. There's
Yes.
clues along the way. So thank you so much for joining us today. I want to give you all a brief 30 seconds to say any closing remarks or anything that you want to add, any last minute thoughts that you may have regarding men getting help. And we call the show, we're gearing it towards men, but anybody needing help.
Well, I'm an advocate, as you know, for mental health therapy, but I'm also an advocate for the holistic care of yourself. Just as you would go to a doctor, just as you have your faith and you go to church,
Hmm.
seek out ways to help your mind come to rest. And that's what therapy does. It helps your mind come to rest. Find a way to relax, find a way to solve problems, and just be at peace with yourself. Know your own story, right?
Awesome.
So that holistic realm, go for it. As you go to the doctor, as you go to church, as you will go and see someone and sit and tell your story and resolve it.
Awesome.
And I would say this to men, please understand that as you are healthy, you then help your generations be healthy. If we're going to turn the stigma around with regards to men
Hmm.
having difficulty coming to counseling, you're going to have to know the experience for yourself so that you then can move from not just knowing how to gain a lifetime of help, but
Hmm.
understand how you can be a solution to others who don't know how to reach out for help when they need
Yeah.
it.
That's so good. Oh my goodness. Yes. Thank you all so much. I did want to put the plug in. If you all need help, you feel free to reach out. You have a professional here that is a clinical, has our own business, CEO of Transitions Counseling. We have pastoral counseling and coaching from Chaplain Houston. So please reach out to them, transitionscounseling7 at gmail.com. And of course, per usual, we need you to share, like, comment, and follow all things Crystal Clear at Crystal Clear Convos on all social media platforms. Thank you all for joining us, and until next time, be blessed.